today we're going to be making a mandala inspired painting. This is what the final piece looks like, so if you know it's actually pretty big. You're going to need something to sketch on, so this is my sketch paper. You're going to need to actually draw on a final paper, so I did this with pencil followed by Sharpie. And you need your tracing paper or carbon copy paper and a number 2 pencil. In addition to all those things, you're going to need your giant piece of paper, which you're going to make your pie shape on through the video using a ruler, compass, and protractor, so nose pieces. And then obviously to finish it off, you're going to need your small brushes and your acrylic paints, which you can use any brand, and decide how many layers and what type of blending you'd like to do. Okay, so the first part we're going to be doing is creating the actual pie slice mandala to start. So you're going to need a compass. I've uploaded a pencil that I brought out a lot further because I want it to be pretty big, and you're going to need a protractor as well. So on your piece of paper, you're just going to find where you think like roughly the center is. And just make a dot, and then I'm spreading this out. Like I said, I want this to be really big. So I'm going to be using a pencil rather than the small one that came with it. This might be a little hard to see on the camera. You'll notice it's not necessarily going edge to edge, which is fine because we're going to end up cutting this out or matting it later anyways. So there's my giant circle. There's your first step. I can now take this out. I'm going to replace the old pencil that came with it, And then we're going to start the measuring process. Okay, so the first thing when you measure is going to be to split the circle right in half so that we can use our protractor. I'm not pressing down super hard, just hard enough that I can see and hopefully erase out some of it later. And I did go through that center dot. That's how you know that you're actually splitting the circle. And using your protractor, make sure you've got your center point on the circle, and the 0 and the 180 are on the line. So it's very important that these are perfect. Then I'm going to be making a mark at 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, and then 180 is already done. So it's a little closer to the camera. See those marks. And then using my ruler, I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to go dot to dot. And then I'm going to go across the circle. Dot to dot. Across the circle. Dot to dot across the circle. And hopefully, if you've done this correctly, which I think I have, you're going to end up with 12 equal pie slices out of this circle. It's going to look like cut cheesecake. There's the center, there's close to the edges, and then we can start the next portion, which is the design. So because I've done this a couple times, when I first made my design, I actually ended up cutting out one of these, and then I used that as a photocopy, and I just used these chunks as my design pieces. So if you're just making this one and done, you can actually do your design right on one of the pie slices and then decide if you like it or not. If you're in class with me, then you're going to get a sheet that looks something like this that has 2 designers that you're going to be using. So this is actually the same exact size cut out of here that you're going to be using. So depending on which one you're doing, next up is the design phase. Okay, so for the design phase, it's really up to you what kind of design you want to do. Mandalas are based off of that central focus, so starting at the points we're working around. So I'm going to be picking a jungle theme. So everything that I do is going to be repeated. So if I draw something in the center focus here, so I want to start with just a simple leaf or floral pattern. So that is going to be repeated all the way around the circle for the 12 times. So that's going to end up looking like a flower, like a blossom from the center there. So I know I want to start sort of with some greenery. Off of this side, I'm going to have maybe like a big banana leaf type of thing. So this is just my sketching. I have two, and then I have my final one, so it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just getting my ideas out on paper, which is really what you should do for most projects. There's one banana leaf, another one. Come up the side here. I'll clean those up as I finish. And then I'm going to pick a jungle animal. So the one I'm going to use is a lion. So I'm going to, because I know this is going to be flipping and repeating, I'm actually going to draw just half the lion. I'm going to put, the eye somewhere around here. Its nose will come through here, and snout. This is a little easier to do once you know exactly what's going to happen with it. I do know it's going to repeat, so I'm pretty confident in drawing half of something. Alright, so I've got some fur coming down through there. I'll bring this closer so you can see. So there's half the design. So let's see if I can zoom in a little bit so you can see better. There we go. I do have a lot of empty space. I'm going to maybe throw a couple more leaves behind here. Maybe have another one that comes off of here, so this will duplicate itself later. It'll end up being 4 when you flip it. And then I'm going to put in just some pattern work on the end. So I like to put something right on the end so it has like a definite end. So when I cut this or frame it, I'll know that there's going to be some sort of finishing point rather than just color or white. I'm just going to do some basic like African type pattern work. Alright, so there's my general plan for this. Like I said, this is just my sketch one, so I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I do have another one over here. I can mess around with some other stuff. So let's say I wanted to try doing even more stuff in the center, so maybe that's my plan to have 3. Maybe this one I want the line to be in the center, so every single one has its own line, and then there's stuff that's going to connect off. So you can mess around with all these designs, but I do these enough to know that this is pretty much what I think is going to work out and what I like. So I'm going to transfer this over to a regular one. So let's just jump ahead to that. Okay, so here's one of those pie slices. Might be hard to see on the camera here, but I've gone through and I've redrawn all this stuff like quite better. So it's no longer just a sketch, but a final design. And then normally I would just do Sharpie right on top of this and erase the pencil out, but I made a separate one so that you could see the difference. So I've got my Sharpied version. The reason we Sharpie it is it's going to make this a lot easier to do the trace and transfer step, which is the next one to put on our final. So I Sharpie the one that I know is going to be the final, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step is getting a piece of tracing paper. Going to size up to this. So it is possible just to trace right on here and not worry about the actual shape. But as I've taught this a couple of years now, I find that if for some reason, if it isn't the exact shape, students have a really hard time wrapping their heads around where to trace and where to put it in. So if you want to save yourself some headache and problems later, just go ahead and cut it so that it's the exact same shape as your piece. And then when you end up tracing this, there's not any confusion on where my endpoint is because the whole thing has its boundaries. So I've got my scrap tracing paper, I've got my design, now I'm going to start tracing it out. Okay, so I'm right-handed, which means I'm going to start at the top left, I'm going to work my way down. If you're left, you're going to do the opposite. You're going to start at the top right, and you're going to work your way down. The goal is to not touch any of the pencil once you draw it on there, because we're going to use that pencil to transfer it onto the final. So it's really important that when you do this, I just made a mark up top there, and I'm not going to touch that part of the paper anymore. There should be some parts like this, doesn't have anything on, so I can always leave my finger there. Your finger has natural oils in it, so if you pick up your hand to adjust, the tracing paper is going to move. which can be really frustrating for a lot of you to put it back. People also sometimes tape it down. I don't really like to tape it down because once you do that, it just becomes a lot harder to get the transfer to work. So I'm just being careful to sort of follow my design. And we are going for perfection, but I mean, mistakes happen. The ideal behind the mandala is everything to be the same. So take your time and do it right. But if you make a mistake, not the end of the world. Okay, I'm probably going to fast forward through the film here just so you don't have to watch me do every single part of this. So we'll take you to the next step in just a second, okay? Okay, so I've got my piece traced here. You can see my tracing, my original. Now we're going to be taking our vinyl paper that we made right at the beginning. And we're going to be placing the tracing paper onto the paper. So just so you have an idea, this is the original. And then this is my traced one. So you can sort of see what it's going to look like when it's flipped. So you can see that line really did mimic itself, which is pretty cool. But for now, what we want to worry about is the tracing paper portion. So you're going to take the tracing paper. This is the side with the lead, graphite. I'm flipping that over. I'm going to set it down into the right spot. And then we're going to transfer it by using pressure. I'm going to trace over the same parts. And this really does have to be exact for it to work. It's not so much about the tracing that's really important, although that will for our next step. It's about the pressure. So technically I could just like take my fingernail and scratch the back, and some of this would come out, so just so you can see what's happening. It's probably super hard to see on the camera, but we're getting a faint little image of the original that I drew because we're pushing the graphite from the tracing paper onto this. And if you watch my printmaking video, or you've taken studio art with me, or 8th grade art, depending where you're at, then you will have done this before the trace and transfer. again, I'm right-handed, so I'm sort of starting at the top in the right area and working my way down. This might be the point when you're thinking my design was a little too intense, and this is about where you want to rethink that and decide, is it worth going forward, or if you want to readjust some things and edit some out. A lot of people's first time common mistake is doing too much. Not to mention it's going to be painted later, so thinking about the detail in your drawing and how easy it will be for a paintbrush to get into some of these spots. Just the center left. I'm just going to peel back, make sure all of that transferred through. Hold up the camera so you get that light little transfer. And there's your first one done. So because I just did a whole tracing on top, I actually have the next phase of this ready to go. So I can just immediately flip it over, and then I can start pressing down and getting my next image. Okay, so full disclosure, it usually only works great twice. So I'm going to actually cut another piece for the next one I do, because once you start to do this too many times over and over, it ends up ruining the piece of tracing paper. So I've learned after doing this a couple times that it's just easier to get another sheet of paper and start fresh. So this is what I was talking about when I said it's just about pressure. So right now I'm taking the pressure of the pencil and just going across everything so it pushes through. Okay, and there's my next print. You can see I've got two. And again, I'm going to cut a piece of paper, and I'm going to start the next way and work my way around until I get all 12 of these filled in with the exact same design, which I'll jump ahead in the video for. Okay, so you can see I've finished tracing and transferring into all 12, and I went through and I started touching up a lot of these lines that you couldn't really see, so when I do my paint, I can see them, which will be the next step. But this is what it looks like, and it took me probably about an hour and a half maybe to do all this back to back, so for you guys it would probably take a little bit longer than that, and I took lots of breaks. So I'll bring you to the next step after you're finished getting everything traced and transferred, okay? Okay, so the next portion of this video is going to be applying the paint. So I've got a selection of colors. I'm sticking with reds, yellows, greens, and then browns, blacks, and whites. So I'm not going crazy and doing a bunch of different crazy colors. I'm just sticking to sort of that part of the color wheel. So I've selected some paint out. I'm going to be using acrylics, which is what I would suggest, or a tempera paint to fill this in. So I'm just going to set some of this aside, and we're going to be starting with the green. I have a piece of palette paper, so you can either use an actual palette, you can use a piece of the palette paper, or you can use wax paper if you like. I'm going to start by putting out, this is green gold. So this is pretty close to the color that I want to use for some of the leaf work. I just want to add a little bit of white because I want to lighten it up. And green gold is also semi-transparent, You can see on the label here how you can see the little black lines through it. And I don't want to have to do like stroke after stroke of this, so I'm actually going to add the white, which will help make it a little more opaque. And it really doesn't take a lot of white to do this. I'm just going to put a little bit there. Start mixing the two together. You can see it's really going to start to brighten it up, give me almost like a neon color. And I'm going to contrast this with some darker green later on. Okay, so there's the first color that I'm going to be using. So I'm using my palette knife to scrape all of it up, put it back down, making sure that it's a consistent color all the way through. I'm going to wipe this off with a paper towel. I'm going to be starting using a very tiny brush. So this is like a size 1. Actually, this is a size 2, but a 1 or a 2 is a good start for this detail work, okay? And then I'll show you the application of the paint. Okay, so it doesn't matter actually where you start the painting, because most of the acrylic will dry by the time you get to the next color. So I'm just sort of picking a random leaf that I know I want to be the light one. And I also know that I'm going to end up doing an outline, so I'm not super concerned if it's not like perfect. And I can also go over some of the pencil lines because this is a little semi-transparent. So if I do a thin enough layer, I'll be able to see the pencil line right through it. And same thing with crisping up the edges later. I know this seems very tedious because it's a very small brush and very small detail, but it'll pay off in the end. It'll be worth it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be solid colors. So as I go, I could be brushing in some darker greens, some lighter greens, and making an actual like realistic effect. For mine, I'm just doing solid colors for everything. Because mine is so detailed, I don't think I need to overcompensate with tons of different embedded colors. I think it'll just stand on its own with the design itself. And it'll be much easier to mimic on each of the pie slices the same if I just stick to a solid color. That's something to think about as well. Okay, that's all there really is to it. I'm going to do some painting here off film, start to get some stuff filled in with the basic colors, and I'll bring you back for some steps further along in the project once all that's done, okay? Okay, so I've got the majority of this all painted in the colors that I wanted. Probably sunk maybe like 4 hours into it so far. And next I'm going to be doing the outline in the background, which I'm choosing black for to make these colors really pop. So I've got my black, which I just placed into this little container. I'm also going to add some GAC 100. You could use water or another paint thinner if you want, but I'm just trying to get this so it's a little more fluid so that I can spread this around a little easier. Some people use a Sharpie at the end too, just to add in all the outlines because you get a little more control with that. But it does have like a weird sheen that Sharpie does, so I try to make sure that it's all paint. This GAC 100 will also make it a little glossy. And then I'll have to decide at the end if I want to add a layer of gloss or matte to the whole thing so it matches, or just sort of let each color composition do what it wants to do. So I'm just getting my black ready in here. And I can always make more of this, but usually a little bit goes a long way. I've got some really small brushes here. So this is a size 0, so very, very tiny. And I'm going to be starting on one of these line heads here just to show you the outline area. And you're going to see all these colors start to pop out a lot more. It's going to make a big difference. I'm redrawing in some of these lines that got lost before, which I can tell where they are, because a lot of the paint is thin enough, especially this yellow here. And I'll show you the next step. Okay, so like I was saying, I'm going through and adding in all my really thin black lines. Yes, this does take forever, but as you can see, it's already making a huge difference. So just look at this side compared to that side and some of these areas that are standing out. It's up to you what you want to outline, what you don't. So I'm pretty much adding an outline to everything. I like doing this with something that's in solid colors, just because I think it makes it look really crisp, and it cleans up all those lines that might not exactly have been your best as you painted. So a lot of times I'll purposely, just rush through filling something and knowing that it's going to be outlined anyways. Okay, I'm going to go through and finish this part, and then I'm going to show you the background portion of it once I'm done with it. Okay. Okay, so I've got one slice pretty much set in terms of outlining. So this is all going to be black behind here. So a lot of this, when you do, it's just going to be background work. So for example, when I start pulling out some of these leaves out of the banana leaves, it's not really an outline anymore because this is just touching the background. You can see I'm trying to leave as much of the green as I can. And I haven't really decided yet. I'm going to add that black line into the actual banana leaf that was originally in the design. First, we're going to see how this looks first and then decide. And eventually I'll switch to a bigger brush here. Background. Tighten this a little bit. And yes, of course, just like every other thing we've done, this is tedious and does take quite a bit of time. You'll notice I'm starting inside the leaf. So wherever the point is, that's where you start. And sort of work your way out. So you get a crisper line rather than dragging in. Okay, so there's that part, and then I also want to show you, this would just be filled in black and that's it. I did do some design work out here before that I didn't end up doing each triangle. I just painted yellow right over, and then I figured I could see it. So I'm just going to show you that part. And my other option, I thought about doing a light blue for the background, leaving everything in outline, but I really wanted to stick to just these colors. But that was at one point one of my thoughts. Okay, so this part, and it's probably hard to see from your angle, but I'm actually going to be going in between, just letting the yellow sit. And I don't really care if they're perfect. If you look at a lot of African line art, you know, they're never actually perfect. So that's okay. I'm going to close off this triangle on each one. And then I have my outer black line, which I'm going to attempt to make perfect. And then I'll just have to add in some of the detail line work and leaves in there. So let's fast forward ahead and I'll show you with this all outlined, filled in, and then we'll just finish with the detail work, okay? Okay, so as you can see, I've filled in all of the background and the rest of the outlining of everything. Now I'm going to be working on just some detail stuff. So it might be hard to see on the camera. Let me see if I can hold this up. Like underneath that yellow, you can see those lines. There were some dashes on the red. And then throughout all this leaf work, there was some details. So I'm just going to be adding all of that in. Nice small brush strokes. That'll finish out the detail. And then I'll show you what the finished piece looks like. Okay, so I just finished up all the detail. We'll just zoom out so you can see the entire piece finished here. And then we're going to map this after it's done. But that's all there is to it. So good luck.